Welcome to my shop. This build is a little different than the ones I normally do. If you watched my last one where I built this walnut hutch, we did this adjustable shelf system. It's kind of a traditional way that they used to do this, or at least one of the ways. And so we cut these notches out in these rails. And this video is going to show you the jigs that I make, how to make those jigs that I use to cut those notches. Makes it a pretty simple process to cut those out and makes them very uniform. You can cut all of them at once, and then it allows those to be all very uniform in where their notches are at. Make sure your shelves are level. And then of course we'll make this bracket as well that fits in there. You can see it's got the shape that fits into those notches, and then the support that will support the shelf. And you can put that in anywhere you want. Move it up. But today I'll show you how I made those jigs, so if you'd like to see that, stick around. Okay, so I'm going to take an opportunity here to build a new jig for making these rails here. What this is I use these for adjustable shelves. You can make these brackets here that fit into them like that, and of course it would sit this way so that you can adjust this in wherever you want that, and then your shelf sits on top of there. And then this also makes that so it's flush with the top of the shelf, so your shelf kind of goes all the way to the side of the cabinet there. But these ones that I have, this jig that I have already, it's spaced at about 1.5 inches on each of these notches. And I just wanted to make a new one because I want to space those at about 1 inch. And so I'm going to make me a new jig. I just used some MDF here to build this. And I'll go ahead and take you through the process of this. And that way, if you want to kind of see how I make those jigs, you can make your own set. So this jig consists of 3 pieces. And this is the first piece. This is kind of the main part of the jig. And this will attach to the miter gauge on the table saw. And then I've got these blocks back here because for each of these other pieces it'll adjust how you attach that to the miter jig. And so you may have to adjust that just a little bit based on your setup and what you have. But we'll get into that and I'll kind of show you. And then this block here also is just a little bit of extra blade protection there. And so you can see we've got that notch made out there. And I actually made this jig using the 2 outside blades of my dado stack. And this one we're just going to go ahead and use the regular blade. The second piece that we have is this piece here. And so this will attach, it has a block onto here to put it up against here. And then you just screw these 2 pieces together and you'll make the straight cut with your table saw, and then you use this piece here to notch that over. And I'll show you that more as we go along. And then after you cut that notch on all of those rails, you can switch over to this piece that you can see where I've got it set at a 45-degree angle. And again, that just has a block on the back to show it where's to line that up with the main part of the jig. And then you cut that notch, and then it leaves you with the cutout basically. You just run it through, make your cut, notch it over, make your cut, and you just run it as far as you need to get however many of those that you want. So that's kind of the idea of that. Let's get into it and I'll show you how I make that. Okay, so I'm going to begin by setting the blade height to about 3/4 inch. And I've just determined that's about how deep I want that notch, and so I'm going to go ahead and make a cut through that piece of MDF there. And then I'm drawing a line up, and that will give me a line to reference from on the jig. And that is right to the edge of the blade. And now we'll attach this first piece to that, and I'll just attach that with some screws. And I will pre-drill those because it is MDF and it's not the best for taking screws anyway. And so we'll sink those screws in. I'm kind of
I'm pretty careful to not strip those out because I want to be able to use this jig over and over. Okay, so now that I've got that in there, I'm going to glue this piece here. I've got a little bit of glue on there and then some brad nets just to hold that. That's to reference that to the miter gauge. And now we'll go ahead and cut that notch into that piece as well. And I'll mark the line to reference from there, and then I'm just going to draw another line an inch away from that, and that'll give us our spacing. And I'll just go ahead and move that piece over and line it up with the original marking line. And then I'll go ahead and pre-drill new holes and put those screws into there as well. Okay, now will become the placement that will attach to that original piece of MDF. And so I'll go ahead and glue a nail on a first block. I probably didn't need to glue that first block onto that, but I'm going to put the second one on because that is where that will attach. And then I'm just going to take that off, make sure I wipe off any glue because I don't want that to stick. And now I've got a piece of wood here, and that's just the same thickness as my blade. In my case, it's 1/8 of an inch. And I've gone ahead and glued that into that notch. And so we'll attach this and we'll go ahead and cut a new slot. And now we're going to basically do the same thing with the second part of this jig, and this will be to cut the 45 degree. And so we're going to do that exactly the same way. The only difference is that the blade will be set at a 45 degree angle. On this part of the jig though, we will be attaching a triangular piece of wood, as you'll see here in just a minute. And so I do need to make that first cut at a 90 degree angle so that I can cut out that triangular notch. And so now you can see that I've got the blade set to 45 degrees, and we'll go ahead and I'm just cutting that through the backing part of the jig there first. And now I'm going to go ahead and cut it through the second part of the jig here that we attach. And now you can see I've got that triangle notch there. And then we'll go ahead and move that over an inch, and we'll cut another slot at 45 degrees. And that'll give us our ability to cut those notches. And again, we'll wipe off the glue to make sure that doesn't stick. And attach that with some screws, being careful not to strip it out. And so here's that triangular piece of block, or a piece of wood that I was talking about. I'm just going to go ahead and glue that in, and with that piece I'm going to go ahead and just stick a brad through there just to help hold that in there. But that glue should hold that pretty good as well. I just got an important note here for using this jig for our shelves, and it's just important to remember that when you're cutting the 90 degree, when your saw blade's at 90 degrees cutting the first cut, you want the jig up against this side of the miter gauge. And then when you cut that and switch that over to the 45, with this part, you want to move it to this side. And what that does is as you tilt that blade to 45 degrees, that lines the top of the blade up with where the top of your 90 degree cut is. And so that's important to remember that. That side we're at 90 degrees, that side we're at 45. And I just put this block on here after lining this up. And you want to make sure you raise, when you're at 45 degrees, you raise your blade just to the same height so that those meet just like that. And that's how you use that jig. And so now I will go ahead and just do a test piece to see how our notches turn out. And we'll go ahead and start. We're going to notch that, or mark that piece so that we know where we started from. And we'll go ahead and just cut all those notches at 90 degrees after we attach the piece with the guide on there. And I'll just run that through the blade a few times at Kind of makes that piece fit over that piece of wood a little better. And we'll just notch out a few of those just to test it out. And now we'll remove that part of the jig, and we'll go back to just the original part, and we'll cut that first notch after we set the blade to 45 degrees. And we'll line up that mark with the same mark on the jig. And I'm going to raise that till it's about 3/4 of an inch as well, and then just kind of double check that, make sure that doesn't hit the jig, and that's set where we need it. And then once you make that first cut, you can stick that part of the jig back on and just finish cutting those notches. And as you can see, we've got an adjustable shelf system. And they are spaced at 1 inch apart. Okay, so for the bracket part, the part that actually holds your shelf in that bracket, what I do is I'll just take a couple of pieces of wood, and this is usually about double the thickness of the shelves that I do. That way you can cut the notch, and I'll just use the table saw, cut a 45-degree notch, and then I'll put the table saw back at 90 and cut that off. And then you can just cut that at whatever length you need to for the depth of your cabinet. And so you'll want to install those rails into your cabinet and then determine what that length is. And then this piece I'll just glue and maybe a couple of brad nails if you want to, or you can just glue and clamp it and hold that on there, and I'll put that towards the bottom part of that bracket. That way your shelf comes in, sits on top of that, and this ends up being level with the top of your shelf and is between those brackets, and so your shelf actually goes clear to the edge of the cabinet, and that way you don't have a gap or anything for things to fall down into. And then of course you can round these corners off or clip those at a 45 or whatever you want to do to kind of dress that up. But that's basically how I make that part of our adjustable shelf system. Pretty simple. So that's how I build the jig for this, to make these notches for our adjustable shelf system. I like this. It's very traditional. It's a good option if you're building traditional furniture and you need adjustable shelves. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and post those down below. I'd be happy to try and answer any of those that you might have. Always like your comments and like to hear what you guys think. Also, if you'd like to support me in my channel and would like to see more of this kind of video where you're a little more instructional on jigs or something like that, just let me know. Also, if you'd like to support my channel and subscribe, that would be great. That helps me out a lot. And again, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video.